There we go. Brigitte is joining. Okay, I think we're ready. I think we are now going live. Let me see. Yes, we're live. So welcome, everyone. Hello, ladies. Welcome, Facebook land. Welcome to the next installment of Let's Talk Horses, an online talkback podcast. I think this is my third episode now, and I'm so excited. It was even more frequent than a week. I think my last one was maybe like Wednesday last week or something, and I couldn't wait to do another episode. So wherever you're seeing this, we'll post a link. You guys can submit questions for the show, or you can join me live. So I've literally just come in from the paddock from working my horses, and I love having them at this time of night because I usually work my horses in the afternoon. So I'm definitely very horsey right now. It's probably a good thing you guys can't smell me because I've been out in the sunshine working for a couple of hours. And there's a couple of questions there that people have submitted from last week. And obviously I've got some peeps on here live with me as well. Thank you, ladies. So if you have any questions, by all means, pop them in the chat or take yourself off mute. But I did want to start with one thing that I think might address a couple of the things from the questions from last week. There's a saying in Access that I heard Gary say where he said, most people are way more, what did he say? Most people are way more worried about being interesting to others than they are about being interested in others. And I was always like, wow, that is so true. Like, how often are you having a conversation with someone and the whole time they're talking about themselves? And most of the time, if you get a chance to talk, they're literally just waiting for you to shut up so they can keep talking about themselves. And how often do you have a conversation with a person where it's them just continuously asking you questions? I can't remember where he goes into the specifics of this, but I've looked at it a lot with people. But today I started looking at it with my horses, because how often do we kind of give our horses this job to do because we have this belief that if they do the job or they do this thing, it's going to make them better or happier or whatever that is. Whereas what if we were willing to ask the horse questions every step of the way and be interested in what they're aware of, like what they're willing to show us, what they know, but also it kind of gives you this place where, like, how often most of us want our horses to be happy, right? Most of us are like, I just want to love on my horse and for them to be happy. And not to say there's anything wrong with that, but what if that's not what your horse requires? And maybe it's what your horse requires sometimes, but how often do we go into a situation with our horses where we've already predetermined what they require from us? And we go about what we're doing with them in order to accomplish the thing that we have decided is the right thing for them. And how often do we actually look at what does the horse require of me right now in this 10 seconds? So it's like we don't listen to them, but to ourselves. Exactly. Like it's like this place where we're way more interesting. We're way more trying to be interesting to the horse, as in just come over here, look what I know, look what I can show you what to do, look what I can teach you. And we're never like, hey, what do you actually require here? Because I have a horse, my gelding that I work with the most here, Ollie, who you guys have probably seen quite a lot, requires a certain energy, and he loves cuddles. He's a very smoochy horse. We finish every session with a good cuddle, and I kiss him a lot and all the sort of things that Gary Douglas says to never do with the horse. But he does enjoy that. But when we're in work mode, we need to have a partnership, and the partnership needs to work in a way where every second of the time we're together, I'm checking in with him as to what he needs and in with his body as to what his body needs. So rather than being like, I have it in my mind, obviously, I want to work my horses for a couple of hours a day, but the reason I want to do that is to make them better, like better versions of themselves. So they're stronger in their bodies, so that they feel better when they're being ridden, so they feel stronger, so that they can use their bodies, because they're not really made to carry us. Like biomechanically, horses aren't really set up to be having this 100-kilo thing on their back or whatever, 50 kilos, 60, 70 kilos, and jumping over things and turning this way and turning that way. They're built to flee from predators. So I've looked a lot at like, how can I package this to my horse in a way that's going to be something that makes him interested in what I'm doing. So rather than me trying to be interested, it's more this question of like, hey, what does he require? And if I can show him that, then I see his whole world start to change. Yeah, like today, one of my horses wanted a bum scratch and he just pushed into me for a scratch. Yeah, well, they can also be very demanding of what they want as well. But it's also like, how often do you come across people, like people you work with or your children or your family or your partner, your loved one? And in your mind, you know what they need to have a better life, right? Like basically you should be God because you know everything that everyone needs in order to make this world a better place. But every time you go there, it's not to say that's wrong. And it's not to say we don't know what our horses require, but how much of everyone else's awareness does that cut off when you go to the place of being so engrossed in being interesting to everyone else that you're never interested in what they're aware of? And horses are naturally very curious creatures. So when you start asking them questions, even energetic questions, they get curious because people don't usually ask them questions. So just to give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. So today, I've also got a mare that I share with my partner, and she's having some body stuff going on. She's really jammed up in her shoulders. We don't really ride her, but we're working on her to get her in a better condition with her body. So the physio's seen her. They've told me the exercises I need to do. You know, I've got this exercise plan, blah, blah, blah. But today I just touched her at her wither and at her tail and turned on MTVSS, which is an amazing body process in Access Consciousness that you can run on people and you can run on horses and dogs. You can find out more if you were to attend a Conscious Horse class. We actually run that. And you can also learn about it in the Talk to the Animals book by Gary, Douglas and Dane here. And I run MTVSS a lot on my horses just for everything, like for everyday sort of stuff. So I put my hands on her wither and tail and asked MTVSS to turn on, and then asked her body, like, hey, what do you actually require to start changing and unlocking some of this stuff that's going on? And it was literally just like, it was kind of a picture, but kind of more like an energy where I just felt her whole body stretch out. Like it was almost like from the front of her feet to the back of her feet, like this stretching motion. So I was like, okay, cool. So then I started doing some stretches with her. So there's so many cool things you can find online. I follow a couple of people that do equine body work, and I know some stretches for shoulders, for front legs, for hind legs. So I started stretching out her body, and then I put her on these squishy pads that I have that are meant to help a lot with proprioception. But rather than me just taking her through that routine of what the physios told me to do, I actually checked in with her and asked her body a question. And it was so cool to see that she knew exactly what she needed. She knew exactly what she required. And then I had another example too, but now I can't remember what it was. So did you have a question, Deborah?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you an example of when Atlas wanted the butt rub, I'd actually come up onto his neck and I just said, what do you require? And he just slid through my hands right down to his butt and turned around, and he has never done that ever. And he just almost sat down on the ground while I scratched his butt just in that one spot. The other side didn't require it, but just that side. But when I asked his body what it needed, that's what it needed. And it was so funny because it was, he was leaning down, and I'm like, he's going to sit on me. And Angela's laughing because he's like, oh, this is so good.
Yeah. But I mean, even looking at that, where a butt scratch to a horse, like they can't reach that far to scratch themselves. I mean, some of them are flexible enough to get very close, but they'll use a tree or something like that. But even having that sense with their body, like how much relaxation does that cause in a horse's world when you hear them say that to you and then you go and do it? Like he's here, he's present in his body, he's in this situation, and he's got this fucking terrible itch in his bum, right? Like imagine you with an itch in your foot, but you can't reach down and scratch it, and you're just standing there and you're tied to something and your hands are tied, you can't get to it. And then someone walked up to you, like, hey, what do you need? And you were like, oh, could you just lean down and scratch underneath my left foot for me? Like, what would that change in your world? Everything. Like, it's almost like torture when you're in a situation where you can't take care of yourself. And a lot of when I looked at this as well, what was coming up was how much horses are geared to survive. Like their natural instinct is survival, and they don't really need us. Like as long as they've got somewhere to get to feed and water, they don't need us. But how much do we make it that we want them to need us, or we need them, or we create this thing with them where we try to have this, rather than having a communion and like a partnership with them, we have this thing where we want them to give us something that we can't give ourselves or something. So yeah, I've just really been looking at this energy with them, because I think last week on the show, Uta as well brought up, she's like, oh, with her mare, she's like, I just want her to get about being happy in her work, like being, you know, alive and happy in the work Uta's doing. But if that's your expectation of your horse, and not to say anything wrong with Uta, because I've done this so much, and it's really just today I've been getting all these awarenesses. But if what your horse doesn't require is fun, then how can they ever get to anything else? It's almost like you put those blinders on them, because you're like, look, unless you're having fun doing this, I've failed. And in some ways you've failed as well. So what if like every time we were with our horses, or a horse, or around horses, and whatever you do, don't apply this to all of the people that you're around. What if you are willing to ask a question, and it's not even something you have to do out loud? Like even what we were saying now, when I tapped into Willow's body, you can do this with people. You don't have to touch them either. You can step into a person's world, perceive where they're at right now, and ask a question about what that person truly requires. And that, my friends, is where like the keys to the universe lie, because then you get to know what people require and desire. It doesn't mean you have to deliver it. It doesn't mean you have to do it. But when you're willing to not be the interesting product, and you're willing to be interested in everyone else, it's like your whole life expands, because you start to have access to all of these different universes, all of these different worlds. And imagine, you know, put people aside for a moment, because, I mean, that would be cool. But also imagine being with your horse and being willing to have this level of awareness with them at all times. How did she make you aware of what she wanted? She just gave me a picture. And I've spoken about this, I think, on this podcast or somewhere, but horses tend to speak in pictures. Like, you know, you look a lot at how kind of autistic and kids and people on the spectrum, like those different, whatever they're called, the words that we have for them these days. But a lot of people that aren't verbal speak in pictures, like they'll send you the picture of something. You know, even a lot of psychic mediums and stuff like that, to get a little bit woo-woo, when they talk about when they're perceiving something, or they're talking to a dead person, or whatever it is that they do, they perceive it in pictures. And I think that's exactly what horses do. They'll send us a picture of something, and it won't be like this, you know, Picasso painting on the wall. It's going to just be this, like this across your face. Like it's not going to sit there and like you can analyze this picture and look at all the colors, but it's going to be like, I literally touched her body and felt her body stretch out like this, like imagine stretching where your limbs go. And I just saw that. And that's how I perceived what she required from me. And that's what I went with. So, and what if it could be that easy as well? So there's a couple of questions from last week that I'll jump into as well. I did want to give you guys just another quick example of, well, okay, so today also when I go to catch my horses, like how often do you go to catch your horses and they walk away? Does that ever happen to you guys? Do you go into the wrongness of it? Do you, like, you know, my horses are in a 3.5 acre paddock. They could run around all day long and I would never be able to catch them if that's what they chose to do. So they have a very clear, like, choice to leave if they want to leave. But I give them that choice. I don't keep them in small paddocks and make myself the most fun thing that they do all day. They have a very relaxed life and they get to relax a lot, they get to sleep, and they get to eat a lot. So when I show up with the halters over my shoulder, they know what that means. That means that there's going to be some work involved. And, yeah, exactly, Brigitte. So how often when our horse looks at us and turns and walks away, do we go to wrongness? So this is something that I was really playing with Ollie today as well, because he never used to walk away. But now that I'm working him a little bit every day, he does sometimes. And he doesn't turn tail and run, although he did one day, but then he ran into the round yard and just waited there for me. But I started looking at, like, if I was interested in what was going on for him, rather than trying to make myself so interesting that he wants to get caught by me, like what is he showing me and what is he teaching me and what is he telling me right now? And first and foremost for me, and whatever comes up for you guys as well, if you're listening to this in the future, like next time you go to catch your horse and they turn and walk away or they look away, start using it as a time to learn more. Ask some questions and slow down, because the main thing my horses are telling me is it's too fast. Like, you just walked into our space, we're eating, and now all of a sudden you want us to stop eating, put our heads up, have the halter put on, walk with you. Like, for them, it's like, just give us a minute. We just want to have a few more mouthfuls of food. So I'll just stand there with them, or I'll sit down in the grass while they eat. And even when I put their halters on, I try not to always, sometimes I do, but I try not to always just instantly take them away. I also try to sit there with them while they're eating. Because if I was being interested in what my horse requires and what they want in this life, would I be more willing to slow down and spend more time doing the things that they enjoy doing? Because I don't know about you guys, but my horses enjoy resting and eating. That's their two favorite things to do. The moment they have a chance to, they will rest and eat. They're naturally very lazy creatures. So, what we want of them is for them to have fun, enjoy work, be ridden, all the things that are like so opposite to what they've been doing for the past hundreds of thousands of years. So where can you become more interested in your horse and become more interested in what they require? So then in turn, they start to become interested in you, because they're like, who is this person? They're on two legs, but they act way more like a horse than they do like a person. Yeah. And even today, I just went and sat with them. I was like, I'd worked in the garden, I'd been working, and I was like, I need a rest. I just need to stop for a little while and let my body eat. And I was like, so I just went and sat in the grass with them, way down the back where they hang out all day long. And, they did their thing. And then all of a sudden they were like, and both came over and said hello. Ollie sniffed around and then started grazing right beside me. Like, I became more this part of their herd because I was willing to be interested in their day and interested in the things that they're interested in, which are resting and eating. So, yeah. I just wanted to invite you guys for today's episode, today's episode, to look at this thing of like, what if every time we were around our horses, a horse, and people, what if we were way more willing to come from a place of being interested in that horse, person, whatever, rather than us trying to be so interesting to them that they want to spend time with us. Because if you ever notice, when you try so hard to be interesting, the moment you're not, you make yourself wrong. Whereas if you're willing to be interested in everything that's going on with your horse, you can never make your horse or you wrong, because all you're going to do is ask another question. Your horse turns around and walks away from you. What's this? What's going on for you now? Like, how can I be different in this situation to create a different reality or a different outcome? Like, it just takes you out of this place of needing your horses to respond a certain way, or needing your horses to need you or like you or anything. And it just gives you this space of being more like a horse, I think, because horses are naturally interested in everything that's going on around them, because that's how they've survived for hundreds of thousands of years. Constantly curious, constantly in question, and constantly interested in absolutely everything that's going on around them. And yes, never needing an answer. Exactly right. So So just quickly, the questions that we had, we've kind of covered, but I'm going to go over them quickly anyway. How can you be aware of a horse's needs and then negotiate with them and still be a leader for them? Well, I mean, they're the best example of how they sort of do that as well, because sometimes there may be times where you need to use force or you need to apply pressure, and sometimes the pressure's a great amount of pressure. But you watch horses in the wild and they will go from grazing to kicking each other violently back to grazing side by side again 10 seconds later. Like, it's about this constant dance of question. So I think like what I've talked about today is you become a leader when you're willing to ask a question and you're willing to be whatever that horse requires in that 10 seconds. Like, that to me is when the partnership becomes less about an outcome and more about the being in the moment with them.
Sarah, I've noticed with having 5 horses, that's their herd, and they change their leadership roles when you sit back and watch them. So you might have the mare being the leader, getting everyone in the right, but then the next day there might be a gelding doing it. It just depends, I think, on, it's like humans. We have bad days and we have good days. And also depending on the dynamics of what's going on that day. So with our guys, they all come up. There's 4 of them in work and one, she's retired. So the guys that are in work, they come up every day. But when they require not to work, they go, nope, I'm just staying here, thank you. And then the leader changes. It's not them that's the leader anymore. It's the guys that want to come up and work. So, and we never force them into anything, but the questions there, Angela's always in question with them. What can I do for you today? And I think that makes a difference.
Totally. Yeah. And that's so true with the herd dynamic. I mean, that's how herds survive, right? Because there might be a horse one day that's not completely on their game. And then if they check out and they're meant to be the one that's relied upon to take care of the rest of the herd would be dead. Like, they all play this role of being super aware of everything that's going on around them. And you'll often find horses will respond in different ways when different things, like different stimulus is going on. Like, my horse Ollie can be very pushy and dominant, but it's usually when he perceives danger. So he wants to keep Willow moving and away from things. And most people would look at that and be like, oh, well, he's being an asshole. And sometimes he is, but then sometimes you watch him and he's actually like trying to keep her safe in his own way. I had another tangent that I was going to go on then, but that's okay. Yeah. So, and wherever you can, spend time with horses and just watch them, and watch them from a space of curiosity and question, because the amount of stuff they will show you just in the way that they are with each other that you would never see, like the amount of things you see horse people miss in horses. Oh, that's what I was going to say. When you were mentioning that as well, Deborah, about your herd, also like acknowledge how each horse requires something different. Like, you know, even though they might all be hunter jumpers or they might all be dressage horses or whatever your daughter's training them in, even though their sport is exactly the same or their training, you know, regime may be similar, every single horse requires a different energy and a different like a different form of that partnership, really. Like, yeah. And how much is that like, and I just love, because everything I say here, I then go, well, it's exactly the same with people. Like, whenever you're working with a group of people, be willing to be different for every single person, and to circle right back on like what this whole episode's been about, rather than being so caught up in being interesting to everyone. What if you were so interested in their worlds and knowing exactly what every horse or every person needed and required of you in every moment, gave you an awareness like far beyond anything you ever imagined? And it doesn't mean you have to do what you're aware of. It doesn't mean you have to do anything with the awareness, but the awareness alone is so much information and gives you so much more access and so much more freedom to have and be more of you. And then just the one other question from last week was, do you have examples in which areas you could apply what you learned in Conscious Horse, Conscious Rider in a business kind of way? Well, again, I think this episode really is what I would love to use as that example in general. So in the next time you're in a business situation, why don't you play with this? And rather than trying to be the one that's so interesting that you've got to tell everyone about all the amazing things you've done or what you've accomplished or all of your ideas, like how often are we on a meeting and we're just waiting for the moment to get in our words so we can tell everyone about these amazing ideas we had? But what if you were willing to ask everyone a question? Cool. So what if question truly was the thing that could change everything? And what if a question, when it comes to horses, could show you a whole different world and a whole different relationship with your horse? So please go and play with it, my friends. I will find a time for our next episode, which will probably be towards the end of this week. I'm going camping for a couple of nights. I'm very excited. I'm going to miss my horses, obviously, but my puppy dog gets to come. So yeah, maybe get out and enjoy some nature as well. Everyone at the moment's out exploring nature, and it makes me so happy to know how much this amazing planet that we live on contributes to us. So thank you for joining. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And remember, if you've got questions, you can always submit them before the Zoom. So I'll get back to you with a time as soon as possible. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Vashima. Good to see you. Bye, guys.